had a plan, you told someone, we're taking you to custody. And let's not even talk about what he said about how he buried his daughter before Islam. Let's not even talk about that. Okay? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted them despite what they did, and they were transformed and became awliya, friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we mention them today, we mention them with honor. Now, you can do this in every generation. Right? You can do this in every generation. You can look at the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, go through their lives and say, if they are not beyond reform, then no one is. We can all be reformed. There's no sense in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending revelation and it can't change people. So really, what we have to do is change our idea about people who are incarcerated. That's my first thing. The second thing that I want to say is many times, so I told you I'm a therapist and I'm a chaplain. So I have my finger on the pulse of the Muslim community. I hear every week what is going on in the families, in the communities, in the societies of the Muslims. I hear, okay? And what I would say is we have a clinical term to what happens to people, when they are removed from themselves. We call it dislocation. So I'm explaining to you very quickly what is dislocation, because then you can understand why so many people end up in prison, especially minorities. Dislocation is this. As you're growing up, you have an identity that's given to you by your parents or your caregivers, the people closest to you. They help you to establish your identity. They know you are this. You are a Muslim. You are Pakistani. You are Bangladeshi. You are Afghan. You are Arab. Okay? And as long as that is not disrupted, they stay on a good track. But if you put them into public school, they are confronted with a totally different reality. And it disrupts that inner identity. It disrupts it. And when there's that disruption between who they are or who they think they are and how the world treats them, when there's a disruption between that, we call that dislocation. Now, this can happen in many different ways. This can happen because of racism. And we know this country has a long history of racism. Okay? This happened because of racism. This can happen because of trauma. Trauma is, an event happened to someone and it overwhelmed their nervous system. And they haven't been able to completely recover from that. And you can't say, well, get over it. Because one person, it may not affect them, but the next person, because of their sensitivity, it affects them deeply. They have a psychological wound that they need healing. Right? In Islam, we understand that the human being is two. He's physical and he's also spiritual. And the same way that he can have a physical wound, he can have a psychological wound. He can be disrupted. And we call that dislocation, this inward dislocation. So I'm going to sidetrack for a few minutes. And I'm going to tell you my story and how I was deeply affected by Tayyiba Foundation. I was born in a Muslim household. I was born and raised Muslim. For the first 4 grades of my life, I went to Muslim school. Okay? And those Muslim schools did so well that I actually skipped a grade when I went into public school. My parents had to put me into public school. So the first year, I didn't agree with what I saw. My fitra was still intact. I couldn't understand why the boys were so crude and vulgar towards the girls. When they looked at them, looked at their body parts, things like that. I couldn't understand that. When I first heard rap music, my heart rejected it. I couldn't relate to it. I didn't like the sound. My fitra did not accept it. But staying in that environment for years, eventually, you begin to accept it. This is dislocation. Right? I'm giving you an example. This is dislocation. So by the time I get to high school, I still know who I am. I know who I am. I'm a Muslim. And I believe. And I have never had doubt about La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Never. But my environment did not accept my identity. I have a Muslim name. Tabari Malik Abdul Zahir. That's my name. So you can imagine, right? Somebody tries to pronounce my name, my first name, my last name. You're the butt of jokes. At a young age. If you don't have a support system that can help you to not become dislocated, what happens is you begin to give up pieces of that identity so that you no longer get hurt. That's what happens. And then eventually what happens is you want to participate in what has become normal. So when I go home, of course my parents are saying, why? You are Muslim. You can't say that. You can't be like that, right? But the community is not strong enough to support me in being a Muslim. So eventually, what do I want? I want what everyone else wants. But it doesn't come all at once. It comes as, I just want Nike shoes. No, now I don't want Nikes. I want Jordans. All right? They're $250. Those are the ones I want. And if my parents can't give it to me, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And then that happens at every level. It happens with clothing. It happens with certain types of food. It happens with cars. And then eventually, I'm just going to do my thing. All right? And I'm in school. I was going to public school. I was in Denver at the time. And I was in a pretty rough neighborhood. And I grew up poor. So my parents couldn't give me everything that I was seeing out there. So I used to see the ballers. And I'm not talking about basketball or football. I'm talking about the ballers that was getting money. They were making a lot of money. And they were coming to school with $1,000 in their pocket at 15, 16. That's what I want. But what comes with that? You have to suppress your Islam and you have to get involved with drugs. And that's what I did. That's exactly what I did. So I learned how to sell drugs and I was pretty good at it. You know why? Because I was a Muslim. What do I mean by that? If somebody wants to buy drugs from me, I'm not going to cheat them. I didn't disrespect women, right? So very quickly, a lot of the users wanted to do business with me. And the suppliers wanted to do business with me. Because if you give me a package and you say, I want $12,000 back in 2 weeks. I'm going to make sure you don't have 11,999. I'm going to have $12,000 as I promised. Okay? And so this goes on. And I very quickly, so I got out, I left my family's house at the age of 16. By the time I was 18, I was very, very successful at selling drugs. Very, very successful. But there's consequences, right? There's consequences to that. Of course, we know there's spiritual consequences, right? But there's also worldly consequences. This is a dangerous world I'm in. A very, very dangerous world. You don't leave the house without your pistol. You better not. It's a dangerous world out there. So, one day, some people got the bright idea to come and rob me. Right? This happens all the time in the streets. They came to my house 2:30 in the morning because they didn't think I was there. And they, broke into the apartment. They're coming down the hallway. And in the hallway, that's what wakes me up. But let me back up a little bit. That night, I did something that I never do. I had a .357 Magnum. Anybody know what that is? What's a .357? Is it big or small? It's pretty big? Who said that? Oh, okay, it's pretty big. .357 is a big gun. If you see somebody walking around with it, you're going to say, no, hey, man, I don't want no problems. So I took it off the top shelf and I put it underneath my pillow. So, for no reason. I wasn't expecting any trouble. I just did it. I just did it. And I wasn't expecting any trouble because I didn't even put any bullets in it, because that wasn't the gun that I walked around with. That was just the gun that I kept in the house. All right? I had a smaller gun, a .380 that I used to tuck. You can hide a .380s real small. So I put it underneath my pillow and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I hear people coming down the hallway. My first thought was that it was the police. But still, I jumped up. I have the gun, and I opened up my bedroom door to the hallway. And when I lean into the hallway, with the hand that's holding the gun. So I lean into the hallway. So let's say this is the hallway. When I look real quickly, when I lean out, they see the gun. This big gun. And it was chrome. So there was no mistaking what it was. It wasn't black. It was chrome. And I think I kind of like stepped into the hallway. When I stepped into the hallway and I looked down the hallway, I saw 4 guys coming down the hallway real fast. Blue bandanas. But when they saw that gun, it was like, when I think back, it was like time just slowed down. Everything went into slow motion. And I just saw their guns coming up like this. Their guns were coming up. And it was like I was looking, I think I was trying to figure out, was it the police, because they had on all blue. So I wasn't sure if it was the police or if I was being robbed. And then I heard the guns start going off. I didn't even hear the guns. I just saw the flash in the hallway. And then I heard it, boom, 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 boom. So of course I'm Muslim. The first thing I do is I drop back into my bedroom and I drop to the floor, because when I back into the bedroom, I see the bullets coming through the wall, like real close to my face, and going and hitting the closet. So I dropped to the floor and I said, Ya Allah, because wallahi, I thought it was over. I said, Ya Allah. I thought it was over. But when they saw the gun, they don't know the gun is not loaded. When they see me duck back into the bedroom, they just assuming that if they come down any further, they're going to die. So alhamdulillah, I'm here today because there was no bullets in the gun. Because if there was bullets in the gun, I would have shot back. And maybe I would be locked up, right? For murder or whatever the charge would have been. I wouldn't be here. There's no bullets in a gun. I can only call on Allah. Ya Allah. Now, they run. I hear them go out. Boom, boom, boom. They're running. I hear one go out the patio. I hear one go out the front door. A few minutes later, I hear a car peel off. And this is an apartment building. So I'm worried about two things. Number one, is there more people like still waiting, like to try to set me up or waiting around the corner or something like that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, are the police coming? No matter what, I got to get out of there, right? So eventually I left. I rented a hotel that night. And first, you feel fear. What do you think I felt after that? Yes? I heard it. No, not relief. Not yet.
Regret?
No, not that. Not yet. Thankfulness. No. Come on. Somebody comes into your house and makes you vulnerable, and you're going to feel fear. But when the fear leaves, what are you going to feel? Revenge. Anger. Somebody's got to pay for this. Somebody's got to pay. And I was well connected at the time. I knew who the players were. And I had a lot of people that was on my team. So eventually, after about 2 weeks, everybody kind of knows what's going on. About 2 weeks, the word comes back. It was one of the guys that was bringing me drugs. He was bringing me a large package of drugs that I could sell to the other drug dealers. And then, he gets his cut and I get my cut. But he wanted to rob me so that I would be indebted to him. He gives me a package. He sends people to come and rob me. And then he tells me, oh man, you got to work that off. Because he knew that I could find better deals other places. I could work with other people, right? It's treacherous. It's treacherous. In Arabic, you say khiyana. It's treachery in the streets. And I'm learning this the hard way. So, we eventually find out who it is, and we're looking for them now. And they're from out of town, so they don't really have a team. Okay, they're coming from LA to Denver, right? Dropping off drugs. They wait to make their money, then they go back to LA. All right? So now everything has flipped. We're looking for them. And finally, one of my friends calls me and he says, hey man, I got Blue over here. Blue was one of the guys that we found out broke into the house. And all these guys were older than me. I was 18. These guys were like 28, 29, 30. Way more experienced, but this is the game that's being played, right? So we find out. And he calls me and he tells me, hey man, Blue is in my house right now. Get over here as fast as you can. So I rush over there to the house. I got my gun. And my friend told me, coming through the back door. He's sitting on my couch in the front room. So I go into the house. And just to make a long story short, I caught him slipping. He has a gun on him too. He's got a gun on him. But I caught him. Now I got my gun, and what you gonna do? And I'm talking crazy to him, because now I got my gun in his face, right? Oh yeah, I can't, it's R-rated, so I can't, we're past that point. But I'm talking dirty to him. And wallahi, our intention was to kill him. That was our intention. In Denver, they have basements. You have a concrete thing underneath the house and all kinds of crazy stuff happens down there. That's what we were going to do to him. All right? But all of a sudden, again, time slowed down. And I heard my heart say to me, how are you going to explain this to Allah? Yawm al-Qiyamah. Right? That's the identity. That's my true identity coming back. Things that my parents said to me. whatever you do, don't shed blood. Right? Things I heard when I was young. And if you plant that and you nurture it, the children will respond correctly. Okay? Even though they may be traumatized or they may be dislocated, if you plant it and you nurture it, it will come back when you need it to. So I've got my gun in his face and we're telling him to stand up because we're getting ready to take him into the basement. And it just dawns on me. This life is going to end one day. And you still have to answer to Allah. Like, how are you going to explain it? There's no explaining it. You don't have no business being out here anyway. You don't have any business being here. Okay, so we have to let him go. And of course, my friend, he's not Muslim. He doesn't understand. He's like, what are you talking about? But because I have rank in the organization, he can't do anything. So he has to let him go. But we both know if we let him go, he's going to come back and try to kill us. And he knows where my man lives at. And of course he knew where I lived. By that time I had moved out. But so this is the life that I was in for about 4 or 5 years. Okay? Now, eventually, I was about 20 or 21. I made tawbah. I made sincere tawbah. Things just started getting out of control, and I knew the only way out was tawbah. Turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah. Right? So, now, I remember one time I came back from, I took a trip to Mexico, and when I came back, the police were waiting for me. Detectives, they were waiting for me. I'm 19, right? I'm 19. The police were waiting for me, and they wanted to know about an old apartment that I had. Not old, I had just left it, like maybe 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. I moved out of that apartment, but there were people that thought that I still lived in there. And a woman and 2 of her children moved into that apartment. So people looking for me, thinking that I was there, they went to the apartment, they tied up her and her children, put the children in the closet, and just, scared her to death because they thought she was related to me some kind of way. And there was no connection. And this was in the newspapers, but I had been gone to Mexico, so I didn't know I didn't know what was going on. But now I know I'm on the police radar, right? I know I'm on the police radar. So you have the people in the streets are after you. The police are after you. The game is up. The game is up. So I made tawbah. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice. And I'm not speaking theoretically. I'm speaking from experience. When you make tawbah, it must be accompanied with tazkiyah, purification, spiritual purification. The analogy that I like to give is this. When you are committing a lot of sins, it is as if your house is on fire. When you make tawbah, the fire is put out. But you have fire damage in the house. Right? You're going to have all this black smut on the walls. Some of the pillars need to be removed and replaced. You're going to have all kinds of problems that need to be repaired. That's, physically, we call it, right, restoration of a property. Spiritually, we call it tazkiyah. You have to purify. You cannot say, oh, I made tawbah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you. This is His promise. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. This is what Allah says in the Quran. Right? Ya ibadi alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim. Right? All my servants who have transgressed against their souls, don't despair of the mercy of Allah. Allah forgives all sins. Right? We know this. But you also have to come before Allah with a sound heart, Yawm al-Qiyamah. يوم لا ينفع مال ولا بنون إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. The day that your wealth and your family, your status, it won't benefit you. The only thing that benefits you is that you have a sound heart. How do you get a sound heart? Tazkiyah. I learned this lesson the hard way. From the time I was 16 until the time I was 21, I was used to instant gratification. That's what the streets gives you. That's what dunya gives you. Instant gratification. All you need is a gun and some money, and the world is yours. And you didn't have to do anything for it. All right? Now, I'm speaking from a street perspective. But there is a greater danger that your children are facing today. And again, I'm not speaking theoretically. I see between 25 and 30 clients a week. Some of them are young kids between the ages of like 18 to 25. And this device right here, it's a big problem. One of the biggest problems that come with this device, pornography. And don't think it's just the boys. It's not just the boys. I think this device with pornography is a worse problem than the streets. There has never been a time. The streets has always existed. I just told you about Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. That's like being in the streets. Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. Right? But this has never existed before. Where someone has access to hundreds of millions of pictures that once they see, it's very difficult to remove from the heart. It's very difficult. When they say Allahu Akbar and enter into the prayer, they see those pictures. They see those pictures. Okay? So, whether you're in the streets or whether you're looking at these devices, you have to do tazkiyah. You have to purify. You have to purify. And if you don't, that takes me to chapter 2 of this story. I made tawbah. I began to learn the deen, like earnestly learn the deen. I got married. I had 4 children. I moved back to California. My father's family is from LA. And so I lived in LA for a little while, but then we went to Denver, then I decided to come back. And I was living here in the Bay Area. Yeah, I lived here. I lived in Oakland. I lived in Richmond. I lived in Hayward. I lived in Fremont. This was between 1997 and 2004. I lived in the Bay Area. And anybody remember Zaytuna Institute? Not the college, the institute. In Hayward. In Hayward. I used to go there. Right? I met the shuyukh that used to teach there. Right? I was maybe about 26, 27 at that time. Right? But Shaitan came to me with a deal I couldn't refuse at that time. Even though I had children, even though I had a successful business, even though I had a lot to lose, there was something that I had not removed from my heart that was planted there when I was young. What do you think that was? I just told you, from 16 to 20, listen, there was a time when I was making $30,000 a month. I've seen $1 million cash, like my own, cash in the closet. I've seen that kind of money. Wallahi. Wallah al-azim. So, what do you think that does to a young man who didn't have to work hard for that? What does that do to him? What's the disease of the heart that he will have? The spiritual disease in the heart that he'll have. Anyone? Yes. Arrogance. That, yeah, that too. Greed. Yes, greed. And shaitan is going to come to you with what he knows your weaknesses. There's a hadith recorded by Imam Muslim, and where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that fitan, this is the plural of fitna, will be presented to you one after another, the way straw is sewn into a mat. If we pick up this carpet right here and I show you the back of it, you're going to see a lot of lines going this way, and you're going to see a lot of lines going this way. One after another. And that's what they needed to make that mat. A whole bunch of lines going this way, a whole bunch of lines going this way. Now we have the mat. Rasulullah ﷺ said, fitan will be presented to you like that. One after the other. And Imam Birgivi, the famous Turkish Imam, he said, it's two. You'll be tested two ways. You'll be tested with your shahawat, right? Your passions. And everybody's passion might look different. You might like to sleep too much. So Fajr is very difficult for you. Right? You might like, to look at this too much. Haram things on this. That's all shahawat. And shahawat normally is that which comes to you naturally.